Hello is a candidate for the most learned English word on the planet. But for almost the entire history of the language, it didn't exist. The greeting is only about 150 years old. In the late 1800s, Victorian etiquette was an immovable wall. Strict social rules prohibited you from speaking to any stranger unless a mutual acquaintance had provided a formal, face-to-face introduction. The invention of the telephone in the late 1870s shattered this structure overnight. Suddenly, people were forced to interact with disembodied, unknown voices, completely bypassing the traditional gatekeepers of society. Early users had no protocol for this. They often initiated calls with clumsy, tentative questions, like, "Are you there?" or the blunt, "What is wanted?" Alexander Graham Bell, the man who patented the device, had a specific vision for how to answer it. He spent his entire life insisting that callers use the nautical greeting, "Ahoy." It never caught on with the public. Today, "Ahoy hoy" survives mostly as a punchline, used by the writers of The Simpsons to signal Mr. Burns is over a century old. While the telephone was a technological success, the actual experience of using it was a social mess. This new communication network had created a vacuum that required a standardized piece of verbal software to function. Thomas Edison saw the telephone as a high-volume tool for the business world rather than a personal curiosity. He realized that a commercial network needed a sharp, unmistakable vocal ping, a sound that could be heard clearly through 20 feet of office noise to command immediate attention. He proposed hello. At the time, this was a relatively new derivation of hail, used mostly to shout at someone at a distance or to express sudden surprise. Edison aggressively implemented this protocol by printing "hello" directly into the operating manuals of the telephone exchanges he equipped across the United States. But manuals alone rarely change human habits. To turn a new word into a global standard, the technology needed a human interface to enforce it. That interface arrived in 1878, when the first female operators were hired to run the manual switchboard exchanges. Early callers couldn't dial numbers directly. Every single connection required a person to manually plug lines into a switchboard, meaning the operator was the gatekeeper for every conversation. These women adopted Edison's hello as a tool of efficiency. It allowed them to acknowledge callers instantly and move on to the next connection without the friction of Victorian small talk. By answering every call the same way, millions of times over, the operators acted as behavioral trainers. They modeled a specific, repeatable greeting for a public that didn't yet know how to talk on a wire. These women were the essential human software, translating a confusing machine into a usable, daily tool. The victory was swift. By 1880, hello had completely replaced ahoy and what is wanted as the standard greeting for the American telephone system. This standardization created a neutral linguistic space. By using a single universal greeting, callers could bypass the requirement for a mutual acquaintance, ending the centuries-old prohibition on speaking to strangers. The greeting became so synonymous with the women who used it that by 1889, Mark Twain was referring to the operators as "hello girls" in his writing. This protocol moved from the office to the front lines during World War I. Bilingual female operators were sworn into the U.S. Army Signal Corps to manage wartime communications in Europe. On the battlefields of France, they used their rapid-fire hello protocol to coordinate troop movements and artillery barrages under intense pressure. Hello is a piece of verbal technology. It was designed for hardware, enforced by a professional labor force, and installed into global culture by the women who operated the world's first communication network.